Vivek Ramaswamy, someone who's running to become the president of the United States of America, said he wants to do a deal with Russia. Let Russia keep what they've invaded of Ukraine. Let Russia keep Crimea. Let Russia keep so many different things, all in return that Russia break their deal with China. He says that economically with China is the biggest threat of the world today. As someone who supported Ukraine in every way, this goes against quite a lot. What do you think of this?
Well, he learns nothing from history. I mean, if Putin is allowed to win and be seen to win this war in Ukraine, then the message that sends to tyrants and for countries that don't play by international rules is disastrous. What message would it send to the Iranians? What message? I'm not saying the Chinese are necessarily tyrannical, but they certainly want to dominate. What message would it send to them, to North Korea? If Putin is allowed to leave this war claiming that he has won a victory, and of course by allowing him to keep land that he has no right to control, not only would that be an awful betrayal of the Ukrainian people, by the way, it would be a shocking message to others around the world.
In priorities, and the priority is the Russia and China deal. And he says the economic partnership.
So can I make it clear?
Yeah.
If he believes that by doing what he suggests, that deal would be undermined, he's living in cloud cuckoo land, and how long would the break between Russia and China last? Listen, can I be also clear?
Yeah.
Putin wouldn't do such a deal, right? So if you said to Putin, you can keep all of this land, but by the way, the price you're going to pay for that is you mustn't have a close relationship with China. I'm afraid to say that isn't going to happen. So I don't understand who this gentleman is. I'm sure he means well, and it's important we have different thinking, imaginative thinking, original thinking. And I hear it from quite respected people that what we need to do is, in a way, compromise. We need to allow Putin to feel as though he's won. We need to allow him to keep some of the territory, because the big picture, the world needs that. I see it entirely in an opposite way. I think that. And by the way, some people refer to Ukraine's history. Members of the Jewish community, for example, feel the Ukrainians were very cruel, and unfortunately, some Ukrainians were very, very cruel to Jews during the Nazi era. But what's that got to do with the war we face today and the challenges that we face today? And I guess I would say to those people, particularly who listen to your program, think about Iran and think about the message it will send to Iran if Putin is allowed to win this war. Not only, by the way, because of the alliance. I mean, people shouldn't forget this alliance that exists between Iran and Russia. Quite extraordinary that they would urge us to support Russia in those circumstances. But it's bigger than that. It's the message it would send about the West's weakness. And I think what's been quite interesting about Ukraine is that prior to Ukraine, there was the disastrous US withdrawal from Afghanistan. It wasn't disastrous to withdraw. Biden was right. The way they withdrew was a disaster.
They left all the equipment behind.
Correct. A disaster. Okay. Yeah. But what I think Putin underestimated was the West's capacity to unite. And that has surprised me and pleased me, okay? That the West has, on the whole, been very, very united in their opposition to Russia, in their support for Ukraine. Now, there are many countries in the world that remain non-aligned, i.e. they're not supporting either side, and they're very important, and it's important we continue to reach out to those countries to try and get them on board in support of Ukraine, because that will further weaken the Russian Chinese axis and the Russian position in this respect. I think we should also remember, we don't know what China is saying to Russia. My own belief is that whatever China is saying publicly, China are smart enough to know that Putin is losing this war. And I'm sure that they will be, part of their advice to him privately will be, how are you going to get out of this? Because
what do you think they'll advise him?
I don't know. But anybody who looks at this at all objectively knows that the Russians are in a bad place, and that Putin personally, in terms of his credibility in Russia, must be also in a very vulnerable position.
And Putin actually gave a speech the other day where he said about Zelensky and about what Zelensky has people are embarrassed of him for how he treats Jewish people or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And he also said that if the West continue to provide them equipment and they're not going to actually provide any of it themselves, then they're in a very bad place. They're just relying on the West.
Well, he's got to say all of this, hasn't he? Yeah. He's got to use propaganda, and it's clear that he must be desperate, he must be concerned, unless he's deluded, unless he's surrounded himself by people, which he may well have done, who tell him what he wants to hear, who tell him that we're winning this war. I don't think he's that deluded, okay? So going back to your question, those that suggest allowing Putin to emerge from this war unscathed with a sense of victory or being able to claim victory are failing to learn the big lessons of history.